And then we're going to leave the rules up. As it says there, we'll be starting at 5:10 to allow everyone who wants to participate the opportunity to join the call. So thank you for your patience in the meantime, and please review the questions on your own, but we will go over them before we start. Okay, it's 5:10. We're gonna get started. We appreciate everyone being on this call with us today. We just want to let you know a few things. The first one is that this call is being recorded. It has already begun to be recorded. The next thing is that we ask everyone to mute yourselves during this process. There will be times to answer questions or ask questions. We encourage you to utilize the chat function just in case, if you turn on your audio, there could be a lot of outside noise that could hinder our ability to hear your questions. And we want to make sure that we answer everything that is, asked if possible. So aside from that, please, we do encourage you to utilize, again, that chat function. It'll be the easiest way for us to make sure that we don't miss anything. We will be doing the pre-asked questions first. And then from there, we will answer those secondary questions in case anyone needs further clarification on certain topics. Town hall rules today are what I just mentioned, muting and let's see. Only questions regarding that subject will be answered. So for the first subject, I can let you know we're doing return to play. So if the question that you have is not regarding return to play, please wait for the appropriate subject. If we go through all the subjects and you don't feel like your question fit any of those, there is a miscellaneous. So please just wait for the right topic so that we make sure it's very fluid and continuous. Lastly, this is, a place for NYSA members to ask their questions, express their concerns. We want to, do our best to provide any clarity that we can. However, we, ask that you just remain polite during the process. So with all that said, we're gonna get started. So these are the topics we'll be going over today. The first being return to play, the LEAP committee, outdoor soccer versus indoor soccer and other youth sports, travel, discipline, communication with the governor, science, NYSA board, and miscellaneous. Okay. So who is making the determination to move forward after phase 2? Is that NYSA, Governor Sisolak, or the LEAP committee? It's a combination. Governor Sisolak has assigned the LEAP committee to be the forefront with deciding what it would be best for youth of all sports to move forward. From there, with their guidance and recommendations, NYSA will follow in suit, will always following whatever their recommendations and guidelines are. Let's see. How are those making the decision justifying these restrictions when states such as New York and New Jersey are returning to full contact play? We unfortunately are unable to speak on the government on behalf of the governments from the other side of the country. We do understand the perception and understanding that those specific states were, in a catastrophic environment, earlier this year where, we've not been, close to that. However, that could play a role in their progression. We just don't know their thinking process, unfortunately. And it's not something we have access to. We can only speak on the local, thought processes. And right now the thought process is that the current restrictions and guidelines are what's best for the interests of the players in all sports, not just specifically soccer. Why does it seem like those making the decisions are following California instead of states like Utah and Arizona? No one's following anyone, because if we were following California as well, things would be different. We're not following anyone specifically. Our local government is solely looking at everything from northern down to, southern Nevada, and focusing just on what they believe is the right pathway for progression of youth sports in this state. At least from the state association perspective, we're not following, and we won't be following Arizona, Utah, and California because we operate very differently than they do. So we don't believe that the LEAP, committees like the LEAP committee are making those decisions based on surrounding states as well. There we go. Is there a way that various municipalities could be aligned with NYSAs? Is that communication happening? Yes. Our executive director, Melanie Stafford, I'm sorry, for those who don't know me, I'm Bree, the director of programs. Melanie has been constantly communicating with the municipalities, always updating them on where we're at, whether it was phase 1, phase 1.5, phase 2. We've always been in contact, you know, down here where we're based in the Vegas Valley. We have a great relationship with the city of Las Vegas, the city of Henderson, Clark County, and everything, you know, else. So we've been consistently, you know, communicating back and forth about where we're at so that we can all, you know, attempt to be on the same page. But with that, why is the city of Henderson issuing citations or warnings for rules not listed on NYSA or LEAP directive websites? The municipalities will first and foremost always follow the LEAP directive, and then they'll, you know, look at our recommendations as to, you know, what we're doing. But each municipality reserves its own right to structure rules as they see fit for their environment. So if there are rules that City of Henderson are referencing that aren't in NYSA's return to play or in the LEAP directive, it's because they've decided that they, you know, needed to add an extra, you know, guideline to, you know, maintain the safety of the residents in their city or, you know, county. Why is the City of Henderson coming around and taking unauthorized photos of my child at practice? So the City of Henderson, along with the City of Las Vegas, and I believe Clark County as well, they have been sending out monitors. These are people hired by the city and or current employees that are going out and just documenting and making sure that the guidelines are being followed. By using their permitted fields, you allow them access to take photos of, you know, the practices and whatnot. It's just something that you're subject to when, again, using those fields under, you know, those allotted permits. Why was phase 2 changed and how does it differ from phase 1? Phase 2 originally had verbiage like minimal contact and 4v4. And we realized that that created some confusion. From the beginning, we've always said this document is fluid and subject to change because we made this back in May. We wrote these out, we sent them over and shared them so that those that were making rules had them for reference and so they could see where our mental space was as well regarding, you know, the reintroduction to soccer. Aside from that, the governor or the government directive, the LEAP directive, always comes first. You know, you have to reference the directive and then you can reference our guidelines. However, we understand that the verbiage was confusing. When it comes to 4v4, we realized that we could have worded that better. What we meant to say was small groups of 8 while still maintaining that 6 feet contact that the directive asks of us. But that's, you know, I guess learning moments for everyone. We ended up, you know, discussing this with technical leadership from across the state, those that are involved with clubs and leagues, and we talked it through with them and we found, you know, the common ground to make sure that this was worded correctly for the intention that we had, and then we released, you know, the revised version of it. Why are we in phase 2 if players are still maintaining 6 feet from one another? Phase 1 was always supposed to be a individually based phase, meaning players and their ball, and that was it. As we went from phase 1 to 1.5 to 2, we introduced group settings, and that's where those shifts were supposed to be made. Phase 1 also only allowed 30 participants on a field. That has been up to 50 with a limit of 25 per half, and that includes players and coaches. And the maintaining of 6 feet from one another comes again from the directive. As of right now, it hasn't changed since June. So the requirement for coaches to wear face masks also comes from this directive, but the directive is very, very clear that we need to be maintaining 6 feet at all times, which is why we also took out the minimal contact. Why have we been so slow to move forward when other activities that could be considered high risk are open? Unfortunately, we do not make decisions on other things, than soccer, and so we do not know what the thinking is behind that. We just know that when it comes to soccer, our guidelines are set, and those are what we need to be following. I wish we could, break this down better for you, but we simply don't know because those things don't pertain to us. We just worry about, the sport of soccer in the state of Nevada. What is the criteria to move to the next phase? The next phase would include contact. So right now there is no criteria until that directive were to shift. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to base this criteria right now, simply because we don't know how to introduce contact without having contact. We are okay with this directive. We support those that are trying to keep our membership and all members and residents of Nevada safe. But right now, there's nothing for us right now that we can base off moving forward until we get some news that the directive is going to shift. The criteria for moving to phase 1 to phase 2 was just making sure there were no outbreaks, people returning to the field, sharing space and whatnot. So once we saw that wasn't happening, we decided to move on into phase 2. What does your timeline to move into phase 3 and 4 look like? Again, this is very dependent on the LEAP directive and when it shifts. It's not a matter of if. We know at some point they will adjust it. We don't know if they'll get rid of it completely. We don't know if they'll put out a new directive. That information isn't something we have access to right now. We just know that in the future, and we're hoping for the near future, that this could change, so then we can evaluate phase 3 and then hopefully move to phase 4 very safely. What information have you been using to decide what phase they should be in thus far? Again, regarding the criteria, we've been evaluating just simple outbreaks. There have been confirmed cases in the north and the south, throughout these various times, and people have been affected by this. So it was really important for us to make sure that these were isolated incidents and not outbreaks within teams and clubs. And so far, we've been very successful in that. And then this is where you come in.
So when will sorry about that. When will we be allowed to do a small-sided competition? Again, with the LEAP directive that we currently have, it says practice only for soccer. We are advocating for within the committee and within the other municipalities to get soccer to return to play. But again, going from a no contact, which the LEAP directive specifies no contact, to full game, we want to make sure that that's phased and done properly and safely. So again, we don't have necessarily a timeline, just like we didn't have a timeline of this pandemic. We all kind of thought this might be over by Memorial Day, and then obviously that's changed. So we are working day to day, week to week on moving things forward, under the guidance of the state's directive, and that's where it comes from right now. So we are working within that. Again, when can we expect outdoor soccer to return to full competition? I can't promise anything. We can't promise anything, but we are hopeful with the science that the CDC is providing and that the LEAP committee is saying and that the state has collected, that could potentially be, later this fall. We are very hopeful that at the very least by the end of the year, but again, kind of moving forward slowly and safely in progression with not just, the pandemic, but going from no contact to full games can increase risks to injury, things like that. So we want to make sure that we're doing it in a safe manner. And there's not, a specific timeline. We're just moving forward as we can and with the guidance that we have.
Okay. And then, oops, there we go. Oh, one back. Okay, and this is the last slide for return to play. Why haven't we moved forward in phases if teams haven't reported any outbreaks? While we haven't had, again, any outbreaks reported, we have had isolated instances, and thankfully it took us a little while to have those instances happen. And so we needed to, monitor, the precautions that were taken to make sure that they were effective. And we've found that so far they have been. But aside from that, a lot of our ability to move forward is restricted by the directive, simply because we have to adhere to that. And again, we have no opposition to it. However, we do understand, everyone's feeling that it's time that it is adjusted. And a reminder that this isn't just soccer specific. This is for all organized youth sports in the state of Nevada, not the Las Vegas Valley. Every bit of Nevada is subject to this. Why are we still using phases if Governor Sisolak has stopped using them for the state of Nevada? So while the governor has indeed dropped his phases for the reopening of the state association will continue to use phases as U.S. Soccer, our governing federation, uses phases. They actually have a 5-phase return to play guideline. It's called Play On. And because we are in line with our federation, we will continue to be using phases, which we've been referencing a lot in the progression, and we will continue to do so because it has worked for other states to progress into some sort of full play soccer. How are Desert Conference teams expected to compete at the same level as other states if we're not subject to the same types of practice? This is a very specific question, so this only pertains to 30 teams in the state, but it's very valid. I sit on the Desert Conference Committee, and in the Desert Conference, it's Utah, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. For those who might not know, New Mexico is in a complete shutdown. They have been since early June, and they are expected to be until the end of November. No soccer is allowed, and before they went into that suspension, they were only at a 5-to-1 ratio, meaning only one coach per 5 kids in an area. So they've had it very, difficult out there. But because of that, we already had confirmed that one state wasn't going to be able to go. We evaluated the situation and realized that we weren't going to be able to send teams of Desert Conference caliber come next weekend, which is the weekend slated for Utah. We, took the interest of players, as our priority, meaning we knew that even if we had returned or gotten to phase 4 very quickly, that they wouldn't have been able to, get that conditioning back and be introduced to contact in a sufficient time. So we contacted the conference, let them know that we are in a very similar situation as New Mexico. U.S. Youth is very aware that some states or some counties are just unable to play soccer, and they respect it, and they're doing their best to not penalize us for it. And in this case, all games for all teams from Nevada are being rescheduled to the 2 later dates so that they can still be made up without suffering any, quote unquote consequences from things out of everyone's control. And that's the end of return to play. And now we're going to head to the group chat. Okay, so we have a lot of questions. Excuse me while I read through them. I haven't been looking at them during this time. So who came up with 1.5? The State Association did. Again, we weren't sure if we were ready to commit completely to phase 2, but we did want to introduce some progression, and that's where goalkeepers came in. We watched phase 1 play out, and we felt confident in the safety, and that's why we moved goalkeepers into training sessions and things to that extent.
So the soccer expert that speaks with the governor, again, we do not know who the governor is speaking to. I assure you that he is trying to get the best information possible, though. All of the LEAP directives cite at the bottom of the page where they're getting their information from. And that's all that we can speak on as regarding that.
To the comments about collaborating with other soccer governing boards, we're doing that on a daily basis. We communicate consistently with the West region, which is the 13, I always get that number wrong, 14 most West states in the United States, alongside with participating in national phone calls. We've heard a lot of different stories, some stories that we can share with you guys so that you understand that even if people or states are back into full play, it's not exactly what everyone thinks it is. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Massachusetts restrictions, and if you haven't, I would absolutely recommend that you go and Google them. But that's their new version of soccer. Vermont has children. The government requirement in Vermont is that each child plays with face masks on. And so, other states that are in full play supposedly are only in full play in certain counties. Other counties can be in phase 1 and are in phase 1. And then you'll have counties, that start across the street that are allowed to play full competition matches. So while the perception is there that that the majority of states have gone back to full play, our reality is that not every county in every state has had that ability. And we're just one of those states that is on the tail end of these transitions. The comment or the question, how about statistics from other states where it's working? There has not been enough time to compile data. A lot of states, even those like Utah, had just started getting back into the swing of things in June. And it's just not enough time to put firm data together. So we absolutely are open ears to what people publish, but we are also taking into consideration the other factors that they've evaluated during this process. So we're not open to it. Again, we're just making sure that the information that we're looking at is solid and makes sense to work off of.
Someone said that the LEAP document states that it refers specifically to 6 feet of distance when on the sidelines at practice, but also states specifically no touching, like the no touch rule, no slide tackling, things of that nature.
The question regarding referencing LEAP, and then at what point do we revisit this and make changes? We've done that. That is why, you know, we've, while still maintaining all the guidelines and implementations of soccer that are required by the LEAP directive, we've also been making our modifications as appropriate, which is why we've gone from phase 1.5 to 2. You know, we've done our best to make those accommodations and make those changes so that while, yes, things are still very restrictive, there has been progression, you know, since we reopened in June. But until, again, that directive changes and we do not sit on the LEAP panel, the LEAP committee, until that changes, we are, you know, going to be following, you know, these guidelines.
Good. All right. So you guys
As far as other organizations under U.S. Soccer, those organizations don't have a state-specific committee. They don't have a state office. They have a national office, and those national offices let them tell them to follow their state's guidelines. So under those organizations like US Club or ECNL, they should be following soccer practice only, which is no contact, distancing, everything that the LEAP committee says. They should also be following that, but they're not subject to anything different than we are regarding the LEAP directive.
Again, we're simply asking for questions regarding return to play. We do see questions that are regarding other topics that we have scheduled. And so right now we're only addressing the return to play questions. If your question isn't answered, it's most likely because it isn't part of this topic. So please hold on to it and resubmit after the fact when we're into that subject. But skipping down to thinking that the governor asked for input from different organizations, and that comes back to when they were putting this directive together, their definition of soccer was very different than ours. So us submitting our return to play was very effective and positively helped us move forward. With the initial thought, or the initial draft of it, we would have been a lot more restrictive to what we can do on the field. And so our return to play phases have been there. They still have access to them. You know, we do offer as much information as we can to those involved, the city, the municipalities, and to everything to that effect. But we have been offering the information, straight out of the state office.
Can somebody mute that dude's phone, please?
There's a question about, can you scrimmage without touching? Unfortunately, you can't, even with maintaining contact. The directive for all youth sports, but including the soccer specific one, says that no scrimmages or games of any kind are allowed during this time.
We can't hear anything. Somebody needs to go on mute, please, before you can.
Let's see, keep in mind. Sorry, we're reading through these and trying to figure out which ones pertain to return to play. We also were muted ourselves here, so we didn't realize that there were other voices, so we do apologize. for that inconvenience. Okay. So I think those are all of the return to play questions. Again, we're not ignoring questions. We just want to stay on the subject. So we know a lot of people had questions in the chat. Please re-ask them when the subject comes along. Again, if you don't believe that it belongs in that subject that you're in, wait until the appropriate one comes along. And at the end, there is a miscellaneous in case you didn't feel like your question fit into that appropriate subject. We're not trying to ignore anyone. We are not trying to skip past things. We just want to make sure that we cover one topic and don't have to revisit it. So we appreciate your guys' cooperation during this. Okay, so we're gonna move on to LEAP.
So the LEAP board consists of different county commissioners, as well as representatives from the Department of Business and Industry, other representatives from the Nevada Association of Counties, as well as the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And if you would like to contact them or get a hold of them, that's something that we can get the correct contact information and post that to our website. As far as teams carpooling, going to the mall and having sleepovers, but not being able to scrimmage against each other, you know, in all of this, in all of the guidelines, the recommendation is still to attempt to have, you know, social distancing and to limit, you know, groups of people, you know, outside of soccer in general. But, you know, we have all we're focused on is what we're doing with soccer and how we're getting to return to play. I understand it's frustrating that, you know, seemingly we're holding back and things like that, but, you know, we are able to get out on the field. We are able to be, you know, with your team and practice while social distancing and while, you know, sharing fields with other teams, still trying to adhere to all local guidelines of, you know, mask mandates and things along that line. If the government's directive is for all sports, why are others ahead of us? Again, you can check out on the governor's website the youth sports directive that also says practice only, and also says that they should be following the no touch rule and the social distancing, and you know, staying apart, and teams that cannot social distance while at practice, you know, like contact sports like football, and other sports like that, are supposed to be adhering to individual drills, things of that nature. And again, we are advocating to the LEAP committee and to the governor and whomever we are advising on, you know, what soccer can do and how we can make changes and how we can, you know, adhere to certain things as we move forward. And they're not necessarily ahead of us. They're just, you know, either not following the directives or not up to date with that. But because we have such good relationships with local municipalities and the governor, we, you know, want to follow and abide by those rules because we do rely on the city and the county for our fields. You know, if the county and the city were not happy with what youth soccer was doing, that they have the potential to pull our permits and there would be no youth soccer, which was actually, you know, a fact that we almost faced come early August. That was when they considered pulling the adult fields and then ended up pulling the adult fields. They considered pulling all permits, and we advocated for youth soccer and said, you know, that doesn't make any sense. You know, we're following the guidelines as stated, and if you do that, then that doesn't help anyone. So, you know, in that sense, it was an actual win because we were able to advocate for youth soccer and moving forward and not having our permits pulled.
Outdoor soccer versus indoor soccer and other youth sports. Why was indoor soccer allowed all summer and outdoor was not? There's a few, you know, variables in this. Indoor soccer facilities are privately owned and they're considered a gym, which is why they were allowed to reopen. However, they are still subject to the rules in the directive. Just like any beauty salon or restaurant that is not abiding by the rules set in place by the governor, should someone go out, out of their way to report these facilities to the county, the city, and someone go out there and find them breaking these directives, they are absolutely at risk of losing their business license and their ability to operate. It has not been allowed because, again, even as a private entity, they are still subject to these rules. However, it is our understanding that no one has made the trip out, which it just, unfortunately is what it is. We have no jurisdiction over that. We just have, say in the outdoor aspect pertaining specifically to our members. How are U.S. club events, ECNL, for example, and travel considered safe, but the same things are considered too risky in Nevada youth soccer? Currently in the state, all soccer is treated the same, so not one is being considered too risky than the other. Both the governing bodies have agreed that you should be following your local government, your local restrictions, and those take precedent, along with U.S. soccer saying that you should not be moving forward in any phase until or if and when your local government has allowed you to do so. So nothing is considered too risky. There are USYS states and leagues playing elsewhere. It's not a specific US club thing. It's simply the restrictions in state are not going to allow NYSA, ECNL, US Club, Girls Academy, DPL, any of that to be played in state right now. And because of the restrictions as well, no team, as long as they're following these restrictions, will be physically ready to compete at that level until we move into those further phases. Sorry, you actually have the next two.
So the other youth sports leagues playing games and traveling, again, if they're playing games, then it's either on private property, and they should still be adhering to those guidelines for gyms and things of that nature. So if they're playing games, hopefully it's not in our state. And if they're traveling, for example, is baseball traveling? Sure. They are able to adhere to that social distancing at practice and therefore can probably be ready for a full contact game or a full play game at an elite level because they don't come into contact often with other players. But that's just speculation. We're focused on return to play soccer here, and I know that it seems contradictory that other teams are doing that, but our focus is Nevada and getting us back here in Nevada. Have we been in contact with other youth sport organizations to move forward as a group with our state leadership? Within our state, there are not other organizations that have, a state governing body like we do. We are more than happy to coordinate with others. And as Bree mentioned earlier, we do talk to every other U.S. soccer state organization within, on a national level as well as within our region to get input, to get feedback. How did you do this? How did you move forward in your state? What's working for you? What protocols do you have? We're trying to get soccer to move forward and doing everything we can to get to that.
And one thing to touch on before we move forward, professional organizations go through their own process. So even if the Lights are playing, even if the Aces are playing indoor, they have their own separate approval and process that they go through to get that approval. That has nothing to do with youth sports or adult amateur sports. Moving on.
Can we explain why we're not allowed to go out of state to play? Again, based on our local guidelines of, being in practice only, no contact, You know, the fact that our state doesn't feel as though we're ready to move forward into gameplay as of yet, which again, we are advocating for. You know, there again, the potential risk for injury. I don't know if you've ever had someone tear an ACL, but I have a background in working in physical therapy situations, and an ACL rehab takes a lot longer than, you know, a few weeks of not being able to travel to a tournament, things like that. So again, we want you to be able to go out and play and travel, but we want to be able to do it in a safe manner for everyone, not just you know, one or two teams. We want everyone to feel safe as they're doing it. Again, other sports traveling, we can't speak for them. They make their own decisions within their league, within their clubs. You know, we as an organization don't feel it is safe at this time, especially because our state has said that it's not safe to, again, go into full contact youth sports. Why are our kids not getting to play when states near and far playing full field games and tournaments? I've read that wrong. Again, going back to other states are making decisions based off of their governor, their directives, their local, you know, decision-making process. Everyone in youth soccer, I can say our goal is to get back to, you know, get back to soccer, but at this point, we are subject to what the LEAP guidelines say. Our players that are individually invited to guest play out of state allowed to travel. At this point, you know, I'm sure that many of you know that we've gone kind of back and forth on travel. We don't think, we've never said that it's a good idea. We've never condoned it. We've never said that we're approving it. As of last Friday, the larger clubs, all clubs and small teams were invited to be on this meeting, but for the ones that could make it, they agreed to not allow their teams to travel for a couple weeks, you know, into September. And then, you know, so any players registered to their clubs, I would assume the club would, they would be subject to what the club says as well as what Nevada Youth Soccer says. And then, you know, in the future, outside of this, any guest playing out of state, we do have a policy on that, and that would need to be adhered to. And then for the CDC has rescinded their 14-day quarantine recommendation for travel, and NYSA follow suit. As of now, the LEAP guidelines still references 14-day travel, but you know, as soon as that is changed in the LEAP guideline, we would amend that to match whatever the LEAP guideline says, as well as the CDC guideline. When will travel restrictions be lifted, phase 3 or phase 4? You know, I don't have a timeline for that. Again, if phase 4 for us is full contact, return to play, we might, you know, again, our phases are fluid. They're subject to change. So we might amend it slightly where, you know, maybe there will be a phase 3.5, which includes travel, maybe something along those lines. But I don't have a timeline for that as of yet.
Discipline. Why were some coaches suspended? Let me make sure I have this on. Why were some coaches, only some coaches suspended when there have been many breaking rules? We only take on suspension cases where evidence is brought to us. And that's why only certain instances have been addressed. We've let everyone know who says, I've seen this and that, what the proper protocol is, should they want to pursue it. And typically the answer is no. We never hear from them again. We again only follow up with those that are breaking rules based on the evidence brought to us and those properly filing a complaint. Who decides these suspensions? So we have a discipline, protest, and appeals committee, otherwise known as our DPA committee. Who is on the committee? The chair is the second VP. And then a committee is put together from a diverse group of people so that there's no two people from the same organization. And then The rest of the process can be found in our policy, in our policies. But yeah, our DPA committee is always comprised, it shifts for every hearing. It's comprised of people who do not have a conflict of interest with those that are being taken to the committee. Let's see. How do you decide on the length of a suspension? It appears there are different lengths. There are different lengths. Prior to being in a pandemic, 6 months was the standard suspension for coaches caught poaching. And that's basically what we referenced. But from there, you know, the two issues that we have that are currently still ongoing, so we can't really speak on them. What we can say is both that the two situations, the two clubs involved did not have the same policies broken, which is why there was a difference in suspensions. But aside from that, because again, the process is still in appeals, we are not allowed to speak on it more than what I've just mentioned. Where can a parent or coach find in writing the exact punishments NYSA has established or given? Currently, we don't offer something like that. I don't know if there's a purpose behind that or if we've simply just never been asked. We can definitely go back and look at policy to see if there's anything that says we are not allowed to, and if there's nothing that conflicts and it's truly something people want on the website, we can absolutely make an update to the website and host that information there. But I'm gonna also, why did this move so much? Okay.
And then just to touch on that, established punishments are within our policy of historical things or just things as Bree mentioned. For example, poaching, you know, that established punishment is 6 months, and that is in our policy.
And then do you see NYSA removing or reducing suspensions to allow these mentors to get back to doing what they do best? I'm sorry, I read it and I spaced out. Do you see NYSA removing or reducing suspensions to allow these mentors to get back to what they do best? Again, we are in the middle of the appeals process. It is ongoing. These could absolutely be altered, but we as a staff are not involved in this, so we can't speak on it simply because we are left out of it, on top of the fact that it's still ongoing and there's no information for us to share at this time. I do realize, and I apologize, someone made a very good point. Why did we not go through the questions once we got through the previous topics? So we'll go ahead and do that now. Again, give us a moment to go back through the questions from that time and speak on some of this. For the, what is the specific science basis for preventing scrimmages? Right now, we're not the ones deciding that, so we don't have anything to mention to you because, again, we're not there yet. And so because of that, we're not preventing it. So we can't speak on how those that are deciding to implement that are making their decision.
There's mention that a Heat team recently played in Colorado. Heat also has a club within Utah, and Utah is allowing travel. So if it was one of our teams, we were not notified of it. And again, we've had conversations with our Heat club here, and as far as they have said, they're not traveling.
Someone did mention the transparency of having that list out there, and again, as long as we want to double check with policy, but if it's allowed, then we can absolutely do that and cite those things appropriately.
Regarding teams under ECNL, if they are registered under Nevada Youth Soccer, they are also subject to our guidelines. And as I mentioned before, they teams that we know of that are dual registered have agreed to, for the time being, not travel.
For the comment of let the coaches decide if players are ready, during that technical director call that we had last week to review phase 2, directors have agreed that right now their players are in no condition to play a full game, at least competitively. I mean, everyone wants to transition to scrimmages, inter-squad scrimmages, and that's the goal. However, there is a consensus that currently, from a technical leader standpoint, from various clubs and leagues across the entire state, that players are not physically any type of ready. They've not been playing games, and they've not been conditioning, and so it's not just one specific thing. They overall, and we agree with them that right now, based on what they've been able to do over the last 2 to 3 months, they're not game ready of any capacity, even if we went into phase 4 tomorrow. For the comment, you won't say our state isn't allowing us. You say our state isn't allowing us, but you won't say who is deciding. Again, it's the LEAP committee who judges the progress of all youth sports. So that is exactly who we are referencing. Once they, make adjustments, then we can move appropriately. But we absolutely would like to stay in conjunction with their decisions, as it is very pertinent to us having access to fields during these times. Again, give us a second. We're just trying to, sort through these questions. Thank you. The person who's JS and asked, so this policy does not exist. I believe you're referencing the DPA one. It does. We have 28 policies, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, to be honest. But it does exist, and we can definitely cite that for you guys after. So we're gonna move forward simply because there's a
Side conversations happening.
yeah, there's a lot of side conversations. So it's hard for us to filter the questions. There is an option here to respond directly to someone and not everyone, and that would help us figure out what is a question and what is a comment, what is a reply. Again, we're just having a hard time filtering through everything, which is why it's taking us a long time to find, the correct questions. But in the meantime, we're just gonna, move forward, and then I'll review some stuff and hopefully we can answer some more questions after the next break. To finish off discipline, what is the ethnic background of the coaches that have been suspended? We do not collect that information, so it's never in consideration when these are brought to the DPA committee. It's not something that we collect at all, or reference, and the same thing goes with the ethnic background of players. We've not had any individual players suspended at this time. It's very, very rare that it happens in general. Does NYSA realize that the suspension of coaches is leaving teams without coaches and causing extreme emotional hardship to the children? We are very, very aware of the relationship that kids have with their coaches. I grew up playing my entire life, and I remember the good coaches and how important they were in my life. So we're very aware, but again, the staff does not make these decisions. These go to our committees, and they do take these things into consideration, but they also take into consideration the policies that were broken, and that's where the severity of the I guess punishment comes from. But it is taken into consideration. There's no question about it.
Is NYSA actively and repeatedly requesting updates from the governor's office to help determine a return to play timeline? Yes, as many as you know, we do regularly have contact with the governor's office, but this has kind of been put onto the LEAP committee, and we do advocate and try and help them determine moving forward in return to play. What is the recent communication that has been had and documented with the governor of Nevada on where the soccer phases stand? I don't have any of that information. I haven't had any communication with the governor as far as documented conversations. I'm not sure that those exist. But if as far as what the LEAP committee is doing, we can put out kind of information on when we are advocating for things like that. Again, putting that on our website if we need to moving forward. Why have you not advocated for our players by discussing inconsistencies with the governor? Again, kind of more so with the LEAP committee. Yes, we have, advocated for our players and for soccer to move forward. And we're fully aware that, it may not make sense why one thing has the ability to do something and other things do not. And our focus is on soccer and getting soccer back to play. Mm-hmm. When moving to the next phase, is it just what you decide, or are scientists and doctors involved in analyzing the data to make informed and scientific decisions? As far as the LEAP committee moving forward, as I mentioned earlier, they cite all of the different organizations that they use to move forward, including local and Nevada health organizations, as well as the CDC, and all of that is being taken into consideration and being advocated for when these conversations come up. What is it going to take to be able to have games again? What kind of numbers or stats are you looking for? I don't have that answer. Again, we're kind of working off of the LEAP guidelines, and I'm not sure what they're looking for in order to make that happen. But on our end, we are working towards, COVID protocols and what that looks like when we are able to return to play. Is it going to make the LEAP committee happy if there's no spectators? What does that look like? What if we're allowed to have 100 spectators? What does that look like? We're doing everything on our end of, what we need to supply in order to have games, whether that is just league play for now or, whenever we are able to get back to tournaments, we're going to have all of those things ready to go and to be approved by whatever municipality it needs to approve those protocols in order to move forward and have soccer. Has there been statistical proof that outdoor soccer activities are causing the spread of COVID-19 in Nevada? As far as statistical proof, I don't believe that there are any studies or any information out there that is specifically causing the spread. Again, we are in no contact and social distancing phases, so our numbers as of right now within soccer are very low, which is fantastic because our members have obviously been doing a well enough job to continue that. And should there be any statistical proof or other things cited from other states that have been returned to play for weeks or months, we will definitely take those types of things into consideration. What didn't work for them, obviously we are behind a lot of other states, so we do have access to information that they're providing us, which is helpful to move forward as well as to advocate with the LEAP committee. Has there been documented communication, facts, not opinions, with physicians regarding the specific correlation between COVID-19 cases and soccer in Nevada? Again, we don't have that, not specific to Nevada, not specific to the correlation of COVID-19 and soccer. We're still very new in this pandemic. We, as a whole, need to have case studies, and there's a lot that go into case studies, not just talking to one person or another, but taking everything into consideration as a whole, which the LEAP committee, as I mentioned before, takes into the CDC as well as local health organizations. They're getting all that information, and those are the kinds of things that we're looking at and we're advocating for. Given the indoor soccer has been played successfully for months without transmission, why can't we play outside? Again, I can't touch on the fact that, or I can't speak on the fact, and I don't have an answer for you when, indoor soccer has been playing, except for the fact that they should be following whatever guidelines is brought to them. And if they're not following that, we have no jurisdiction there. All we can say is if you have an issue with it, if you don't like it, that, to reach out to your local municipality to let them know that there's an issue. But, those are the types of things that we take into consideration, and we see, we're very aware, when we talk to the LEAP committee, when we have talks with the governor, that kind of thing. What makes going into a grocery store, casino, gym, or restaurant safer than playing youth outdoor soccer? Again, I can't tell you the decision-making process into what is safe and what is not, when it's not regarding youth soccer, when it's outside of our organization. And as I mentioned before, we realize that there's inconsistencies in all of this. This is all very new to all of us. We're taking it day by day and week by week, and our focus is what are we doing to get soccer back, not necessarily why comparing soccer to other places, organizations, things like that. Have you read the study showing how damaging it is to children to deprive them of youth sports? The study was not cited, so I'm not entirely sure which study you're talking about. And we're not intending to deprive anyone of youth sports. As I've mentioned many times, our goal is to get back to youth sports, but as of right now, we are under this LEAP directive, and we are supportive of it, and we are, trying to work with it in order to allow kids to continue to play soccer, albeit practice, whatever level we're playing at. We are still out there on the fields, and we are, doing our best to move forward with that. What is more important, the physical health risk, which has been proven to be extremely low, or the mental health risk? that will have long-standing effects on youth players. Again, what's important to us is safely getting back to play for soccer. And we can't touch on, what's more important for those types of things. It's all important. It's, the physicality is important, the mental is important. Our goal is to get back to soccer and hopefully have zero rates of transmission between any children. In a realistic world, will that happen? We don't know. But we're trying our best to do it safely and following the guidelines that we've been given, and using those to move forward.
Okay, so those are the last of the questions for science. I'm not. We see references only to the Surf Cup study, and we have reviewed it. Again, we're just waiting for some more information to come in. California, came back, shut down again, and then reopened, and they're still trying to figure out, what that means for them. So we're definitely paying close attention to those things. Let me read through these. Okay, I don't see zero rate. Okay, so moving on to the board of directors. How long of a term does the board serve? Currently, there is no policy that limits the amount of time that a board member can sit on the NYSA board. The next question is, what is the election process for the board? It's very lengthy. I mean, it's not that lengthy, but for this call and for the sake of time, I'm just going to reference the numbers. So I would definitely recommend writing this down for your reference. But the section number is section 4, specifically section 4-3, and that will walk you through the process of the voted on positions, and then the league positions and how they come into play. Have there been attempts to change these policies? At our AGM, which is our annual general meeting, which is typically in June, however, this year it was in July, member clubs, affiliated organizations have the opportunity to bring forward any policy changes they'd like to see, and those are reviewed for vote. And I, from my understanding, the last year and change that I've been here, Vegas United, for example, submitted a policy change to the term limit 2 years ago, and that was voted down by those able to vote. And then this past year, Downtown proposed a policy change that would reformat to the way votes are allotted. However, that was also voted down by those able to vote. When is the next election? The election happens every year at the AGM. You can find more information on that. And again, another policy, it's going to be section 4, which is the entire board of directors. There are positions, seats that are up on even years, and there are positions that are up on odd years. They're up for re-election every 2 years. And yeah, the next election, should be in June. However, should things change and we need to adjust that timeline, we will absolutely post that on our website. And who can vote at the election? Again, this one is a little lengthier. So for the sake of time, I'm going to cite the section that covers this. And that's NYSA section 1, specifically section 1-6. And that goes over the election process, the criteria, and how votes are allotted for voting at the AGM. Is there a conflict of interest with having clubs represented on the board? We have a policy that covers this entirely. It is policy, this is my list of policies. It is policy 23. And policy 23 outlines the standards for those that hold any affiliation with clubs, regardless if they're board members and have a child playing at a club, or if they're board members and are operating a club. Each individual is held to these standards outlined in, again, section 23. Of the current staff and board of directors, do any have a player in NYSA to see the negative impacts on the youth? Honestly, this one was a bit of an uncomfortable question, just because it's not really, you know, something that we need to share, but for the sake of transparency, we'll let you know that no, of the 3 NYSA staff members, none of us have children. However, there are some board members that currently do have kids involved, and they're still making their decisions, you know, on behalf of all of youth soccer, while being able to firsthand see, you know, their kids coming and going from practice. And that's the end of the board section. So we're going to review the questions. Give us a...
I see a couple comments about Guy, the president. Yes, he has communication with the governor's office, which we are thankful for, because ask any other type of association who is able to, you know, provide insight and attempt to have, you know, their questions answered immediately. It's pretty rare, and he is, you know, we communicate with him on a daily basis, multiple times a day. He is fully aware of all of these comments and questions. And, you know, he felt that because we are in the office every single day, this is our full-time job. Our board members are volunteers, that, you know, we were the best to be answering these questions. There's a question about a coach being fined and where the funds they pay Nevada Youth Soccer go. We have talked about that, and being relatively new here, I'm not sure how it was done in the past, but I've talked about giving those funds back into soccer, whether it be via scholarship or you know, or something else that is helpful for soccer in Nevada, but definitely not to go to us, as we are a nonprofit. For games, getting back to games, again, we are pushing for that, and we are hopeful that games will be back sometime soon. Again, I don't have a timeline, but it would definitely be as soon as possible, and in accordance with the LEAP guidelines and everything like that. We are moving forward with Thanksgiving as if it will happen, but at any time that could change.
And to touch on Thanksgiving a little more, I'm the tournament director for Thanksgiving, and I've had a hard time trying to even promote this tournament. If historically this time last year, I was sending so many emails to so many people trying to promote this, and I've only sent one, and that was the initial opening of it. Like Mel said, we are moving forward with the impression that we'll have to have it, but my hesitation has been simply because I don't know if I'm going to. You know, I'm not hoping that we're the first, because that means other tournaments miss out on, or other clubs and leagues miss out on their tournaments, and that's absolutely not the hope either. We understand how many clubs and leagues are able to offset their costs for players by utilizing these tournaments. So there's no intention for us to be the first. We just want to make sure that the moment that we are able to, that we do safely. But as of today, September 1, I as a tournament director have no idea if I'm going to be able to have my tournament or not. And this 3-month mark is very concerning for me. So I hope that clarifies a little more. I'm not, I'm not sure where we stand as a tournament right now, but if we are allowed to have it, then we will absolutely do so. There is a question, why do they let members of clubs serve the board? It's not a matter of the staff letting. Again, these are elected positions. The people are voted into these positions by those that are given the the ability to vote, and that again is in that breakdown of section 1-6. So no, it's not, us letting them. These are elected positions that, are anonymously voted on at the AGM should you have a vote.
Again, someone reiterated a question about how they can communicate to LEAP, the LEAP committee specifically, and we will post the proper outlet to voice your concerns or ask them questions to our website by the end of this week. As far as jurisdiction over Mexican leagues, Las Vegas Valley Soccer League, that has nothing to do with us. Any jurisdiction would come from whatever municipality they are permitting their fields through, as well as if they are an organization that is, if an organization that has a business license, that kind of thing, then they are subject to whatever the city, municipality, and anything that they fall under in the LEAP and guidelines and governor's directives.
And again, just to reiterate, because we do not oversee, in this case, Mexican League or any, including Rainbow, any leagues that are unaffiliated with us, there's no way that we can get it quote unquote blocked. All sanctioning and all permits that were pulled were simply, at the decision of their own, municipalities that they receive permits from. We were not involved in those. We were just notified, as everyone else was, during the press releases that were sent out.
Recording for this town hall, again, we will post to our website later this week.
The question of why are not all clubs represented? There are only X amount of seats, and there are definitely more clubs in Las Vegas, let alone the entire state of Nevada. So there's not room for every single club on the board. And again, these are elected positions. So any club, should someone, affiliated with that club decide to run, has every opportunity to be elected to the board. But there's nothing in our policy that says every club has to be represented, because the number of clubs does fluctuate throughout the years. And for that reason, we just have the positions that are assigned that you can find on our website. There's a question, is there anywhere that we can see who has voting rights? Again, these change by year. The policy that I cited, 1-6, explains this in detail, but my attempt at a summary is these votes are determined by player count. And so because different players go different places every year, nothing is exactly consistent. So you would have, you would have these leagues have their votes, fluctuate to a certain extent. But yeah, the again, the policy explains it in greater detail. I mean, I have it in front of me. It's just difficult to go through the entire thing because it is detailed. Someone mentioned the minutes on the website. From now on, every board meeting, to further promote transparency, every board meeting going forward is going to have the meeting minutes, even the drafts, and it'll say draft on there until they're approved, posted to the website so that those wondering what's going on, those unable to join those meetings, they can see at least the discussions that are going on during those meetings. There's a question if you can ask US Soccer to answer questions that we might not be able. Being part of the federation, you have every right to go and explore your options. US Soccer has a great staff and they're very great at communicating with its members. So should you decide that that's a route you want to take, you have every right to do so, and we encourage you to get involved and be able to communicate and represent Nevada in a positive manner. But the answer is yes, you can absolutely reach out to them with any questions that you feel we aren't able to answer, or if you would just like further explanation on certain things that you think they'd be able to assist you with. I'm not 100% sure if we're allowed to inform people how many people have votes. And I just say that because I've never run an AGM myself, but we can absolutely look into it. And if it's something that we can share, we will, and we'll let everyone know. I just don't want to commit yes or no because we'd have to read through the policies and figure that out. But if it's something that we are allowed to share, then we will absolutely do so. Actually, side talk, you can see who gets votes and how many votes currently right now on our website. If you go to our website, I believe it's under about, I'm trying to remember the layout right now off the top of my head. It's about AGM. At the bottom of the page, you should see the report from this past year's AGM, which has the breakdown of votes. And then to figure out why people were given those votes, you can reference section 1-6. And that's why those people were allotted those amount of votes. But yes, you can absolutely find out right now on the website who was given what vote and how many this past year.
About getting voiding your Nevada player card, that kind of thing. If you have further questions on that, I don't have that answer. You can reach out to our state registrar, and we can, if that's a valid concern of yours, we can move forward with that, or get you the proper answers on that through our state registrar. And going back to that, if you've already paid for it and used your insurance on it, you can't void it for this year, but you can. Um,
Again, the insurance goes back to, even though there aren't games being played right now, it's still utilized for practice, and you're covered at practice. Your players are covered at practice, coming and going. If they trip on the sidewalk and they break their knee, they're covered. But because we're a month in and that has been utilized, unfortunately, we are just unable to void those.
as far as tournaments being postponed, if it's the first weekend back to play, the city, as of right now, I believe they are telling tournaments and or whatever events are happening 30 days out, they can get a full refund. And then the team would be taking a risk, or whomever is hosting that event is taking the risk to not get a full refund if they don't cancel it. I believe it's 30 days right now. So if whatever tournament decided to, take that risk, they, and if it was within that return to play and the city said that they could use those fields for games and tournaments, then I would see no issue in a tournament being able to play the very first weekend back.
Let's all have registered parents of players of the association have a vote. Again, anything is possible. It just has to be changed in our policies. And that is the process. You can read those process, or that specific process, on our policies page, but it's not to say that that can't happen. It just needs to be voted in. And again, that has to be done through the AGM, which is not something that the staff is involved in. Someone said, maybe the executive director should be here. Melanie is the executive director. She just joined us at the end of June after Kelsey Tesoro decided to step down and leave the organization. So we're here. I know a lot of comments have said that we don't make a lot of decisions, and we do. It's just not pertaining to these things. We focus a lot on our state cups, on our Thanksgiving tournament, on our ODP, coaching education, making sure kids have fields to be outside on. We do a lot of the day-to-day things. So we do have a lot of answers for these things, but we also don't want to misinform you, first and foremost. It wouldn't be fair to give you wrong information. And so we're not, some of these things that we don't have the answers to, we just got these questions over the weekend. Some might take, a little longer to get answers for, but if you follow up with us, you can absolutely, explore getting more answers from us. It's just, again, the short turnaround time didn't allow us to, get the full firm answers that we would typically want to have for you. Okay, we're gonna move forward. Miscellaneous. So this is the last bit of it. Again, we appreciate everyone, going through this with us. Why are we paying club fees right now if no games are scheduled? We can't speak on why your club is collecting fees. We do not know how they are structured. We never get involved even after, if you leave a club and there's a financial issue. Nevada Youth Soccer does not handle those issues. All that we've charged you for the year is $32. It's good for one seasonal year. So it started August 1 and it'll take you, or August 1, 2020, and it'll take you through July 31st of 2021. That it provides insurance not only for games, but for practices. Again, players are covered with secondary insurance, and that's why, at least at the state level, we went ahead and charged clubs for every kid that they registered. But if you'd like to know more about why you're playing, club fees because of the lack of games, we just encourage you to turn back to your club and ask them those questions. Why is NYSA not separated into North and South? We do this for our ODP program, but only for our ODP program. There are many states that are large that only have one state association. Washington is a good example where They, just like us, have a big set of mountains in the middle from their east and west side. But they are one state association. They oversee it all. And it's the same thing here. We, go from the top of the state all the way down. And it's just it's very rare for a state association to break into two. So that's why most states only have one. I believe there's only 5 states of the 50 that are given, a second or like a break in the middle. Why not have a waiver that reduces and eliminates liability, allows parents to decide if kids should play unrestricted games and practice? Even if we introduced a waiver of this kind, you would be cited for breaking the rules by the municipalities because they are following the LEAP directive to a T. So if you attempted these things, if we said here's a waiver, you would still be responsible for that, and you can incur some hefty fines and also jeopardize our ability to use the permits. I know a lot of people wonder why we've been so strict on following the LEAP directive, and it's simply because, as Melanie touched on earlier, we've seen people not follow the rules and have their permits taken, and if we have our permits taken, then a lot of kids are left without a soccer field to play on. And that's the last thing we need. We know things are already difficult as is, and losing field space simply due to lack of compliance is not something that we're willing to tread and risk, because again, we want every kid to have the opportunity to at least be out there, see their teammates, and have those interactions and be active. And that's why, even if we chose to do something like that, it still wouldn't benefit you, because you would still be subject to the municipalities, and you would jeopardize, all of the players under NYSA that benefit from having permits for fields. What makes you think you know what's best for our children without getting our input? In no way, shape, or form do we think we know what is best for your child. Only you, the parent, knows that, and we acknowledge that. We never want to make you think that that's not the case. However, as a collective, and I say collective along with the technical directors, as I mentioned, the leaders, on the technical side from your clubs and leagues, we, at least in this instance of being game ready, have evaluated that it doesn't make sense right now. But in no way do we, make these decisions thinking that we know what's best for you and your child. We respect that you are their parent and that you know what's best for them, but we're not thinking individually for every child. We're thinking as a collective to maintain our ability to remain on the fields. Seniors in the last year of playing, hoping to be scouted for college, and for some players, this is their only option to go to college. With suspensions and the inability to travel to tournaments, how do you foresee NYSA helping our youth? Well, currently, the NCAA has a dead period for soccer coaches. That is through the end of September. So there are no college coaches out there doing anything. They're not allowed to recruit, interact. It's a dead period for them. So right now, there should be no players losing out on that opportunity for exposure, because even those that are playing are not being afforded that opportunity. Going forward, it is a long year. We're looking into assisting you guys with video and finding ways to implement that into the platforms that we have existing, so that, it's been very clear from, our connections with the college coaches that the budgets that they had historically are not what they have today. And if they historically, had the budget to go out to 5 events, that could only look like 1 or 2 these days. And so they've emphasized the use of video and how that could be a game changer for those looking to be scouted and identified. And so that's where, we want to step in, and we want to provide different opportunities that could still help, these players. But right now, with the college dead period, we don't feel that anyone is being hindered for their ability to be scouted, because no one, regardless of, again, of where you're playing, is allowed to be scouted right now. When making your decisions, you take into consideration the mental strain you are putting on kids. Absolutely. It's not only children that have been mentally affected by this, we all have, but children are more susceptible to these things, especially when they're the ones not playing. And we take it very seriously. Mental health is not a joke. It is a very real thing. And we want to make sure that everyone is in a safe, positive environment to do all these things. But we also, need to keep everyone as a collective, safe, and we want to move forward as a unit, which is why, some of these decisions are made, but it's never, ever, ever with the intention that we do not care or revise our thinking to not benefit players. Oops, yeah. Have any of the staff of NYSA actually witnessed the interaction of the youth athletes who at this point are afraid to even speak to their teammates, stand 5 feet from them, and have general interaction from a social standpoint? I've been out doing field checks, typically because we have adults that are playing on our youth fields and we want to make sure that we keep the kids safe. But I have been out on the fields making sure that everything looks great, trying to, see what the environment looks like. And yeah, since June, since we were doing tryouts to now, I've been out there maybe 7 to 10 times. I personally have not seen this example, and that just could be, by chance that I've not come across it. But the environment that I've seen are players, engaging with each other, socially distancing their backpacks, being out there and looking very excited to, be out of the house and be on the field. And so while I don't think that this is, a lie, or I don't want to invalidate that this could absolutely be happening, from the experiences at different locations that I've been to, I have not personally seen this. However, we have attempted to be out there to understand what's going on, at the fields. Let's see. If NYSA is an advocate for a positive youth soccer experience and other benefits surpassing youth sports in Nevada, why are you not actively advocating for our players? Do you want to touch on this? Sure.
So touching on this, again, as we've said a few times before, we are trying to advocate for our players. This is a forum. We are trying to get your feedback and hear your concerns. And we are trying to, whenever we're able to get back to, gameplay, scrimmages, any sort of moving forward in soccer, we are trying to advocate for positivity. The experience, we're doing our best to provide a good experience, provide options like ODP, provide local tournaments that are elite levels that you don't necessarily have to travel to, that kind of thing. So again, we are advocating for our players, we're advocating for our teams, and hopefully, with a lot of the feedback we've gotten tonight, we can take that and use that to continue to advocate and use that as, a parent example, a member example, that kind of thing, moving forward, hopefully soon with, returning to play and the conversations with the LEAP guideline or the LEAP committee and the governor and any other conversations we have with municipalities on returning to soccer.
So that is the end of the questions that we have, at least prepared from those that submitted. Excuse me, but we will continue to go through these questions. Why do Northern leagues get similar votes as Southern leagues? How can they have just as many, registered? Again, that's just the policy and how it's written. So if they have the numbers to provide such, then they're allotted those votes. That's also what I mentioned of downtown this past year. As you can see in the AGM minutes, that they proposed a vote to, or proposed a policy change to change that. Again, it was just not passed. Aside from a refund, do we give any, again, the player cards are not only for competition, they're insurance for any team activity that is sanctioned by NYSA, which in this case is your practice. So you've been utilizing the insurance for, a month now, and we're just unable to, give those refunds. You could reach out to your club and if you're if you would like to step away from the sport, you can absolutely talk to your club about that and see if there's a discussion there.
If there's a question about, Guy and his access with the governor, and if he'll take your concerns, if anyone wants to speak to Guy or anyone on the board, any specific questions, you can email any one of us and we can, make that connection and forward on your questions so that you can get that answered specifically by that person.
Someone asked again if we're going to suspend teams and coaches if they travel to play. Right now, again, as we mentioned on Friday, this past Friday, club leaderships from across the state and leagues and everything, they all decided that there is no travel right now. So because there is no travel, there will be no suspensions because no one should be traveling because clubs are not allowing it. There is a question regarding travel and how it can impact a Desert Conference. We'll evaluate the November dates as we get closer. It would be very silly of us to make a decision today for that November date, and we want to make sure that we provide our teams with the best opportunity to compete. So as of right now, we're hoping to have them there. And we, are doing our best to make sure that happens.
There's a question about a coach. If there's a coach that violates rules and then puts the whole association in danger with losing fields, how should NYSA or even us as a community handle that? Again, we've been advocating and speaking with all of our clubs and leagues, our leadership within them, and trying to get every one of us to hold each other accountable for following these policies and following the guidelines. And, if you see another coach on another team who is just, disregarding everything, to say, hey man, this puts us all at jeopardy. At a certain point, if we understand that, a lot of people have not wanted to necessarily take the proper steps in notice of a violation, but you can absolutely speak within our community and try and get people to follow the guidelines that way.
There's a question regarding continuously paying for insurance when no contact is allowed. Again, this also covers no contact injuries, and we're working at a state association for 7 years. I've definitely seen a lot of no contact injuries, and they unfortunately do happen, and they can be pretty catastrophic to a player. And so the insurance it's included in the $32 that we charge annually. Any other fees that you're being charged right now do not go towards that, as we've already collected fees. So any other fee should be referenced back to your club or league if they're charging you for something else and you have an issue with it. But we do not charge anything other than the $32 at the beginning of the season. Again, if we want change, who do we contact? It's a very broad question. Because again, it's very broad. Like, if you want to be specific, if I want to change this, if I want to change that, please send us emails. Our emails are on the screen. We'll give you the information that we have, or we will forward it on to those that can assist you with it. We're not here to block what you guys would like answered. We just simply don't have every single answer for you, and it's not to say that we don't have every single resource either. So if we have someone else that can assist you with this, whatever it is that you want changed, we can definitely send your concerns and questions to those that we feel could do a better job than we can. Again, everyone's encouraged to vocalize your concerns to us, and we'll, you know, forward them on. Please utilize us. You know, we hate getting phone calls of, oh, people are sending emails here, but it's not the right place. You know, we'll help you find the right place, but it's better if we work as a collective rather than, you know, individuals. And again, we don't want to hinder your ability to find answers for your questions. I have a question. When doing field visits, what type of identification are you wearing showing that you're a representative of the state? I always wear my Nevada Youth Soccer logo. You will never see me out there without it. It's very important for the purpose of identification. If you have, and so will all the municipalities who have those going out and taking photos, they have clear signage on their shirt that they are there to do something on behalf of that. If you see someone taking photos of or videos that is not with your team, your organization, please, you know, contact local authority. Please contact, you know, the municipality, you know, marshals. That is a very serious thing. We want to make sure all your, you know, children are safe. I have not been out there and had this instance happen. However, it absolutely happens more often than it should. But at least, you know, from our perspective, from my perspective, I'm always wearing the Nevada Youth Soccer logo. Again, anyone who's there with the city or the municipalities, like the county, they'll always be properly identified on their shirt. You know, they'll have big, you know, letters on the back. If you feel like this person is not with those people and they're not providing you evidence that they are, you should absolutely contact your local authorities.
Regarding Warner's question, if the first weekend we are allowed to play as a tournament, will it be postponed because of injury concerns? Warner, I don't have that answer for you. It depends on what phase of play we're in. Have we been in phase 3 where we can scrimmage? I'm not sure. It'll be, you know, working with our clubs, leagues, and local teams, as well as the city, as well as whoever is hosting that tournament, to see if that is something that they want to move forward with. But I can't predict that at this time.
There's this the reiterated question of if we have a tournament the first weekend of allowing play. You know, if we're hosting a local tournament, regardless of who's hosting it, whether it's us, a local club, if they don't know a week out that we're allowed to play, chances are that tournament's already canceled because we're not. No one's gonna gamble on that. I can say, you know, at least from our position, we'll probably, you know, if we have to cancel, we'll probably do so a few weeks in advance because, again, the priority of the player safety is number one on our list, and we don't mess around with that. But again, if it's not our weekend, if it's someone else, the reality is if we get put into return to play and a week later there's a tournament here locally or scheduled to be here locally, it's probably going to already be canceled by then because they wouldn't be able to accept out-of-state teams because there's not soccer allowed here, and they wouldn't be able to make everything happen in a week's time. So just, you know, being someone who operates a tournament, the feasibility of it is just not there. So I really wouldn't consider that a concern because, again, I would anticipate that it's already canceled by that time. There's a long question that I think is just summarized by why are we not supporting coaches to the full extent? All the information's here. If coaches have questions, they are more than welcome and to reach out. We have had coaches, call the office and get explanations and better understand these things in the past, honestly, all summer. Since we've gotten back to soccer, we've had local coaches make those phone calls. Your local clubs should also be supporting you with this. That's why you have directors of coaching, directors of, boys and girls and of youth and olders. They're here for your support too, but if they don't have the answers, that's okay. You can come to us. And if it's something regarding NYSA policy, rules, we'll find, some sort of solution for you so that you understand what's going on. But again, a lot of it is, there's a lot of coaches and there's way more, coaches than there is the three of us. And so a lot of the times we need you guys to come to us to understand that there's a miscommunication. And so, checking in with us regularly is absolutely welcome. Sending us emails often, calling to get that clarification is absolutely welcome. Our office right now is open from 10 to 1 with modified hours. And then, eventually when things get better, we'll be open from 10 to 3. But please, do not hesitate to have your coaches reach out to us for some sort of clarification. Someone asked about being able to participate in State Cup and NYSA programming or NYSA sanctioned tournaments without being sanctioned to, anything under US soccer, and you can't. Even on the US club side, you have to be sanctioned, or your team has to be sanctioned by one of the governing bodies of the Youth National Council, and you can Google who exactly is in the Youth National Council, but US Youth Soccer and US Club are both members of the Youth National Council. So no, you'd have to be, for State Cup specifically, you have to be part of Nevada Youth Soccer. To participate in sanctioned tournaments, you have to be registered to a organization within US Soccer's Youth National Council to participate. Okay. All right. So again, we appreciate everyone's time. We understand that you may still have frustrations, and we absolutely think they're valid. We attempted with this call to clarify some things so you guys could better understand where we're at, where our thinking process was throughout the summer, and to give some validity to the things that were true and valid. But yeah, we do appreciate everything. It's just, obviously this is not easy. There's no blueprint on how to maneuver yourselves through a soccer association during a pandemic. And we've been using our resources across the country from other state associations to help us figure it out. But they, had the same blueprint that we did, which was none. So everyone's taking this as best as they can. Everyone's local governments are different. Everyone has different factors that they have to, work around. And we just ask for your cooperation, your patience. That doesn't mean please sit still, but it just, please understand that there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. However, we do want you guys to reach out to us. We do want you to send us emails of your concerns and we can help you sort that out. We want you guys involved and we never want to hinder that relationship with our members. So we appreciate the time. For those wondering, this call will be available within the week on the website. And we'll post it and we'll let everyone know so that those who are unable to join us or those who want to review everything can. And it should be so in its entirety. We might cut out the front 10 minutes where it was nothing but silent, waiting for everyone to come on. But aside from that, shouldn't have anything taken out. But yeah, we do appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for, being here with us. I know it wasn't exactly, a quick 15-minute phone call, but the time is appreciated. Your questions are important. So Again, if you have any questions, concerns, give us a call at the office. Our emails are right there and on the website. And we hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thanks.